The evaluation was scheduled for 9 o'clock Thursday morning. If Marcus did not speak to the assessor, not a paragraph, not a sentence, just one word, any word in any language, the school district would begin the transfer paperwork by end of day Friday. A specialized residential program, 83 miles from his grandmother's house, the kind of distance that starts as temporary and becomes permanent in ways nobody says out loud when they're signing the forms. He had not spoken in 14 months, not to his teachers, not to the two child psychologists the district had cycled through, not to his grandmother, who had raised him since he was 4 and who sat every evening in the chair beside his bed and talked to him about her day in a voice she kept carefully steady, the way you keep a candle lit in a draft. It was 8 years old. He had the kind of face that made adults want to say something, and the kind of stillness that made them understand, quickly, that there was nothing to say. On Wednesday evening, the day before the evaluation, a man in a gray jacket and worn jeans walked through the front entrance of Crestview Family Services on Magnolia Avenue in Burbank and asked the woman at the desk if he could spend some time with the kids. Nobody told him about Marcus. He found him on his own. There is a family services center in Burbank, California called Crestview. It sits on Magnolia Avenue between a dry cleaner and a parking structure, in a one-story building that was a dental practice until 1997 and still has the faint outline of a tooth logo in the stucco above the front door, where the old signage was removed. The inside has been repainted 3 times since then. The current color is a yellow that someone chose because it was supposed to feel cheerful and that mostly succeeds. And the hallways smell like coffee and a particular kind of cleaning product that every institutional building seems to order from the same supplier. Crestview ran after-school programs, family counseling, crisis support, and a Wednesday evening drop-in for children in transitional care, foster placements, kinship arrangements, families moving through something hard enough to need a soft place once a week. The Wednesday program had been running for 11 years. At its best, it was a room with good snacks and a patient staff, and enough space for kids to be exactly as loud or as quiet as they needed to be. There were 14 children in the room that Wednesday evening. 13 of them were in various states of motion, drawing, building something with blocks in the corner, arguing good-naturedly over a board game with a piece missing. One of them was sitting by the window at the far end of the room, in a chair slightly apart from the tables, looking out at the parking lot. That was Marcus. It was wearing a dark blue hoodie, slightly too large, the cuffs pulled over his hands. His sneakers were new. His grandmother bought him new sneakers every September, and it was October now, so the newness was still visible in the white of the soles. He sat with his back very straight, the way children sit when they have decided that stillness is the safest available option. He was not looking at anything in particular in the parking lot. He was simply not looking at the room. The man who walked through the front entrance that evening was Keanu Reeves. He had been coming to Crestview on and off for 2 years, not announced, not documented, not connected to any foundation or initiative or press cycle. He had come because a social worker he knew had mentioned the Wednesday program once, the way people mention things they quietly believe in, and had shown up the following Wednesday to see it for himself, and had kept coming back when his schedule allowed. He helped with homework sometimes, played cards, sat with kids who wanted company and gave space to kids who didn't. The staff knew him. The children knew him in the way children know someone who shows up regularly and doesn't want anything from them, with the particular ease of familiarity that does not require explanation. He was wearing a gray jacket that evening, dark jeans, a plain t-shirt. He had driven himself. He came in through the front, said hello to the woman at the desk, and walked down the hall toward the sound of the room. He stood in the doorway for a moment, the way he always did, taking in who was there, what the temperature was, where the energy needed to go. His eyes moved to the window at the far end of the room, to the boy in the dark blue hoodie with his back to everything. He watched him for a moment, then he walked to the supply cabinet near the door, found what he was looking for, and crossed the room. The staff member on duty that evening was a woman named Diane Okafor. She had been working at Crestview for 7 years. She was 34 years old, with close-cropped hair and the particular patience of someone who has learned that most of what children need cannot be scheduled or accelerated. She was good at her job in every way that mattered, and quietly exhausted in the way that everyone who does her job eventually becomes. She knew Marcus's file, the way she knew a story she had read too many times, every detail vivid, none of it easier for the repetition. His mother had died 14 months ago, a Tuesday morning in August, a car accident on the 134 freeway, 22 minutes from their apartment. Marcus had been at school. His grandmother, his mother's mother, a 61-year-old woman named Evelyn, who had worked for 30 years as a medical billing clerk and who had not expected to be raising a child again at this point in her life, but who had not. He hesitated for a single day, had picked him up from school that afternoon and taken him home and told him as gently as any truth that terrible has ever been told. He had not spoken since. The psychologist had names for what he was experiencing. Selective mutism, compounded by acute grief. The silence was not defiance and not incapacity. It was a door he had closed carefully from the inside. The two clinicians the district had assigned over 14 months had both been competent and both been unable to find the handle. The evaluation Thursday morning was the district's third and final position. Diane had read the memo twice. She had called Evelyn the night before to make sure she understood what the timeline meant. Evelyn had said, "I understand." Then she had been quiet for a moment and said, "He'll talk again." "I know he will." Diane had said, "I know he will too." She wasn't sure she believed it, but she said it because Evelyn needed to hear it from someone who was paid to assess these things, and because the alternative, saying nothing, would have been its own kind of cruelty. She had watched every attempt over 14 months, the gentle approaches and the structured ones, the play therapy and the art therapy, and the one well-meaning volunteer who had brought a therapy dog named Biscuit and sat on the floor for 40 minutes while Marcus watched from exactly the distance he maintained from everything. Biscuit had eventually gone to sleep on the volunteer's feet. Marcus had watched the dog sleep. He had not spoken. When Diane saw Keanu cross the room toward the window, she started to move, not to stop him. She had learned enough about how he read a room to trust that instinct. She moved because something in the way he was walking, unhurried, with purpose, holding something she couldn't yet see, made her want to be close enough to witness it. She stopped near the board game table, close enough to watch, far enough to be invisible. He reached the window. It did not crouch down to Marcus's level in the studied way that adults do when they have been told that crouching makes children feel less threatened. It pulled the empty chair from the nearest table, set it beside Marcus's chair, not across from it, beside it, facing the same window, and sat down. He had a deck of cards in his hand. He set it on the windowsill between them. He did not say anything. He did not look at Marcus. He looked out at the parking lot, the same unremarkable view Marcus had been looking at for 40 minutes. 2 streetlights, a row of parked cars, the lit sign of the dry cleaner next door. They sat like that for a while, 3 minutes, maybe 4. Then, without turning his head, Keanu picked up the deck of cards and began to shuffle. Not a performance shuffle, not the elaborate waterfall of someone showing off. A kid, practiced shuffle, the kind that makes a small rhythmic sound, cards against cards, steady and unhurried, the way someone shuffles when they are not thinking about shuffling. Marcus's eyes moved from the window to the cards. Keanu kept shuffling. Diane was watching from the board game table, and what she saw over the next 20 minutes, she would describe many times in the years that followed, always with the same detail in the same place, always arriving at the same moment. She could not fully explain. He shuffled for a while. Then he dealt 2 hands onto the windowsill, face down. He picked up his own hand and looked at it with the mildly interested expression of someone who has been dealt a mediocre hand in a game they are not in a hurry to finish. He waited. Marcus did not pick up his cards. Keanu rearranged one card in his hand, set the hand face down, looked back out at the parking lot. 2 minutes passed. Marcus picked up his cards. He looked at them for a long time. Then he set them down on the windowsill, face down the way Keanu had done. He looked back out the window. Keanu picked up his hand again, studied it, discarded one card to the small pile he had started between them, waited. Marcus picked up a card, put it in his hand, sat with it. They were not playing any game Diane recognized. There were no rules being followed that she could identify. The cards were simply moving between them, one at a time, slowly, in a rhythm that had no visible logic and a very clear feeling. Neither of them spoke. 14 minutes into this, a boy from across the room, 7 years old, named Theo, the loudest child in the Wednesday group and the one most reliably drawn to any activity he didn't understand, wandered over and stood behind Marcus's chair. Keanu looked up at Theo. Then he looked at Marcus. He dealt a third hand onto the windowsill. Theo pulled over a chair. The three of them sat at the window. Still no one spoke. At 7:43, Diane checked the time and remembered, with the specific weight of a thing that had been sitting at the back of her mind all evening, what was happening at 9 o'clock the following morning. She watched the window for another minute. Then she walked to the supply closet at the end of the hallway, stood inside it, and cried quietly for about 90 seconds. Not from sadness exactly. From the feeling, familiar to anyone who works with children in hard situations, of wanting something very much for someone who has no control over whether they get it. She dried her face, walked back to the room. Marcus was still at the window. Keanu was still beside him. Theo had fallen asleep in his chair with his cards still in his hand. The room was winding down around them. Parents arriving, coats being located, the soft, organized chaos of departure. Marcus's grandmother, Evelyn, came in at 8:15, a small, upright woman in a gray coat, a canvas tote on her shoulder, the controlled composure of someone who has been arriving at this room every Wednesday for 14 months and has learned to read its temperature from the doorway. She saw Marcus at the window. She saw the man beside him. She did not recognize him. She crossed the room toward her grandson, with the careful walk of someone who does not want to interrupt something they do not yet understand. Keanu looked up when she reached the table. "You must be his grandmother," he said. "I am," Evelyn said. "I'm Evelyn. I'm Keanu." I said it the way people say their name when they are not offering it as information about themselves. Just a name. A minimum of courtesy. Evelyn looked at the cards on the windowsill. At her grandson, who had turned in his chair and was looking at her with the careful, watchful expression she knew better than any expression in the world. "We've been playing," Keanu said. "He's been winning." Marcus looked at the cards, then he looked at Keanu. Then, very quietly, in a voice that had not been used in 14 months and sounded exactly like that, small and unpracticed and real, he said one word: "Lying." The room did not stop. Nobody else heard it. Theo was asleep. Diane was near the door helping a child locate a missing jacket sleeve. The board game had started again at the table behind them. The room was the same room it had been 30 seconds before. Evelyn heard it. She sat down in Theo's chair, very carefully, the way you sit when your legs have decided the situation warrants it. She did not say anything. She did not reach for Marcus. She sat, and she looked at her grandson, and she kept her face exactly as steady as she had kept it every evening for 14 months, in the chair beside his bed. Keanu looked at his cards. "I've got a 7, he said. "That's not nothing." Marcus looked at him. Then he looked at his own cards. Then he said, still quiet, still unpracticed, "I've got 2 7s. Diane was told about it by Evelyn in the parking lot. She listened to the whole thing. The word, then the second sentence, then the few minutes that followed before Evelyn had to get Marcus home, and she stood in the cold air of the Crestview parking lot and did not say anything for a while. Then she said, "What did he do?" when Marcus spoke. Evelyn thought about it. "Ejus nodded," she said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. The evaluation at 9 o'clock Thursday morning was conducted by a woman named Dr. Patricia Wren, a child psychologist contracted by the school district who had been doing assessments for 22 years and who had seen enough of these cases to walk into the building with no particular expectation in any direction. Marcus arrived with his grandmother at 8:50. He was wearing the dark blue hoodie, the new sneakers. Dr. Wren was in the assessment room, which was a small space of the main hallway. 2 chairs, a table, a box of art supplies in the corner, a window that looked out at nothing interesting. She had a yellow Lego pad and a pen she kept clicking without appearing to notice she was doing it. She introduced herself to Marcus. She told him there was no pressure. She told him she just wanted to spend some time with him. Marcus looked at the window. Then he looked at her. "Do you know any card games?" he said. Dr. Wren called Diane that afternoon. She did not usually call the family services worker. She sent reports. It was more professional. But she called that afternoon from her car in the school district parking lot because the thing that had happened in the assessment room felt like it belonged to a phone call rather than a document. She told Diane what Marcus had asked. She told her what they had done for the next 50 minutes. Not an assessment, a card game, and then another card game, and then, gradually, a conversación that moved from the card game to the room, to the school, to other things, the way conversations move when they are not being conducted but simply allowed. It talked for 40 minutes, she said. Not continuous, stops and starts, but 40 minutes, Diane said. What did he talk about? There was a pause on the line. His mother, Dr. Wren said. Mostly his mother. The transfer paperwork was not filed. Marcus remained at his school, in his classroom, in his grandmother's house, 8 blocks from Crestview, on a street with a single large sycamore tree whose roots had lifted the pavement in a long, gentle ridge that Marcus had been careful to avoid. On his bicycle since he was 5 years old, he did not return to full speech immediately. That is not how these things work. There were days in the weeks that followed when the silence came back, not as completely as before, but present. A weather, not a wall. His teacher, a man named Mr. Caldera, who had been in the classroom for 16 years and who had waited, with professional patience and genuine affection, through 14 months of quiet, began to hear Marcus's voice in the middle of November for the first time. Just answers at first, then questions. Then, once, a story about something that had happened at recess that made the whole table laugh. Mr. Caldera wrote about it in an email to Diane that evening. He wrote about it for 4 paragraphs and then apologized for the length and said he just wanted someone to know. Diane wrote back, "Please don't apologize. This is exactly the kind of email I need." Nobody at Crestview told the story publicly. It was not their story to tell, and they knew it. Evelyn did not tell it publicly either. She was a private woman who had been private her whole life and who believed that the most important things that happen between people belong to the people they happen between. But she told it once, to her sister in Riverside, on the phone on a Sunday afternoon in December, about 6 weeks after the Wednesday evening at the window. Her sister asked her, "Who was the man?" Evelyn said his name. Her sister was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What did he do?" When Marcus spoke, Evelyn said what she had told Diane in the parking lot, that he had nodded, that he had looked at his cards, that he had said something about a 7. Her sister said, "That's it?" "That's it," Evelyn said. Another pause. "How did he know?" her sister asked. How did he know that was what to do? Evelyn thought about it for a long time before she answered. "I don't think he knew," she said finally. "I think he just sat down." There is a Wednesday evening program at Crestview that has been running for 13 years now. In the supply cabinet near the door, on the second shelf, behind the construction paper and the spare markers, there is a deck of cards in a plain blue box with no markings on the outside. Nobody is entirely sure when it appeared or who left it there. The staff use it sometimes and the children use it sometimes, and it has lost 2 cards over the years, a 4 of spades and a jack of hearts, and nobody has replaced them because the games they play don't seem to require a complete deck. Marcus is 12 years old now. He is in the 6th grade. He is not a loud child, and he is not a quiet one. He is a child who chooses his words with a care that his teacher notices and his grandmother has known since before he could read. He has a best friend named Jerome who lives 4 blocks away. He has strong opinions about which card games have fair rules and which ones don't. He still goes to Crestview sometimes, not every Wednesday, but sometimes. He sits with the new kids, the ones who are very still, the ones who have found the chairs slightly apart from the tables and turned it toward the window. He doesn't always say anything. Sometimes it just pulls over a chair and sits beside them, facing the same direction they're facing. He is not doing it because anyone told him to. He is doing it because someone once did it for him. I have been thinking about the word Diane used when she described what she watched from the board game table that evening. She didn't say it was remarkable. She didn't say it was moving, or unexpected, or any of the other words that would be accurate. She said it was patient. She said, "I have never seen anyone that patient with a child who wasn't giving them anything back. And I keep turning that over, not giving them anything back. I think about how much of what we do for each other is quietly conditional on a response, on acknowledgement, on the small confirmation that what we are offering is being received. I think about how hard it is to sit beside someone, fully present, when they are not yet able to let you in. When the door is closed and you cannot find the handle, And you don't know if the door will ever open. He shuffled a deck of cards for 4 minutes. He looked at the same parking lot. He dealt 2 hands. He waited. That is not a technique. That is not a method. That is something older and simpler than either of those words. I am not sure I have it. I would like to think I do, but the honest answer is that I don't know. Most of us feel silence. Most of us, when someone isn't giving us anything back, try harder, or pull back, or find a reason to be somewhere else. We don't sit for 4 minutes and shuffle cards and look at a parking lot. But maybe we could learn to. Maybe that's the whole point. This story is fictional, inspired by Keanu Reeves' well-known reputation for kindness and patience. If something in this one found you, drop a comment. Tell me what you took from it. I read them. Share it with someone who needs a reminder today that presence, just sitting beside someone, can be enough. Subscribe if you want to be here for the next story. See you in the next one.